For people who are tired of riding on subway cars with no air conditioning when it's 40 degrees out, there might be some good news coming. Yesterday, the federal finance minister, Bill Morneau, joined the mayor at St. Clair West Station for a funding announcement. The government is directing $360 million of infrastructure funding to the TTC. What will the money mean? What will it mean for you? We'll find out in a conversation with the Mayor of Toronto, John Tory.
Good morning, Matt.
You take the subway regularly. How dire is the situation as you see it when it comes to the state of good repair?
Well, I mean, we're behind by a couple of $1 billion now. Are those things all urgent in the sense that something really awful is going to happen? Of course not. But I think in terms of just improving the system so that we can make it as reliable as we want it to be to attract more people to come, these are all things that will be done that will make a difference, a positive difference, and they have to be done sooner or later. So I think this is very good news, and it will allow us to get on with things that Mr. Trudeau said weren't very sexy, but I guess beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I think this stuff is very, very important, and I'm thrilled by the money that's coming.
Talk a little bit, because people seem to be universally cheering this announcement. Where is this money going to go?
It's just going everywhere, and I don't mean to sort of avoid your answer. I mean, it's going all the way from new Wheel-Trans buses to fixing the rail, the actual rails on the subway, to overhauling the subway cars. I heard you referring to those earlier on. I mean, there's just about everything in the system you could mention because we'd accumulated this long list. And when I say we, it had been done long before I got here. And so we're just attacking that list, all things that have been council approved. I should also mention that there are tens of millions going into the planning and design of the new transit projects like Smart Track and the Relief Line and the Waterfront LRT so that we can get on with some of that planning. But most of it is going to what they call state of good repair, and thank goodness for that.
You, as a politician, would know this. I mean, that there's generally much more excitement about funding and getting behind new things than fixing what we already have. How is it that we ended up in a situation where the transit system that we have is kind of hobbling along because it doesn't have enough money to keep it rolling?
I think for precisely the reason that you discussed. I think, that politicians and even to some extent, I guess officials love to go and cut a ribbon on a new project or talk all about a new project or allocate money to a new project, even though the old projects are the ones that are already running, need money to be put into them. It's no different than anybody's house that's listening or their car. I mean, you have to put some money into them to keep them in top shape. And so I think over time that list got longer and longer as people just said, well, if we have to make a choice, we'd rather sort of do it on something, the shiny new object, than on the overhauls of the subway cars. That's not too glamorous. Mr. Trudeau is right about that. But thank goodness they said from the beginning, and I'd give them credit for this, that they would allow us to put the money into state of good repair because that was something that was very important to us. And that won't get them as much credit. There won't be as many signs around, saying new project being built here. That's coming in phase 2, by the way. They do have a second phase to this, which will be probably the subject of some announcements, I would say, in a year or so. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, we can just grind out these repairs that have to be done to make the subway more reliable and faster and safer, and they're much needed.
And so do you have the sense, I mean, in your meetings with them and in your meetings with members of whether it's the Prime Minister's office or the Infrastructure Minister's office, that they're listening very closely to the priorities?
I think the approach taken, in particular by the Infrastructure Minister, Mr. Sohi, has been outstanding. I mean, they have listened to us in the context of the importance of transit itself, and, by the way, other forms of active transportation. That is something in which Toronto was, we were quite forthright in saying we would also like you to help us with transportation by allocating or allowing us to allocate to some of this money to pedestrian, cycling, and so on, and they agreed. They agreed to base the initial allocation, and I'm concerned going forward that we should keep it this way, on ridership, because that does benefit Toronto, Matt, but, I mean, that's the way it should be. We have by far the biggest transit system in the country, and therefore by far the biggest need, and they acknowledged that, which took courage, because there were people in other parts of the country who, got less because of that. But also, they allowed the money to be spent on state of good repair, whereas they could have said, no, we're just going to contribute this to, say, the Relief Line, and everybody will sing our praises, and we'll go and cut a ribbon somewhere. But they allocated it to these overhauls and these repairs and things that are frankly even hard to explain sometimes. There's such a long list, but I think that was absolutely the right thing to do, and I give them full marks.
How concerned are you that people will avoid taking transit now because it is unpleasant and unreliable, that it's going to feel like 34, 35 degrees today, and people will do anything they can to stay out of the tin can that is the subway underground that has no air conditioner?
I am concerned about it because I want people to take transit. We need people to take transit for congestion and for environmental and a whole host of reasons. I'm concerned about the fact it seems to take, I'm told, 4 days to fix one of these air conditioning units. And I'm not blaming anybody for this, least of all the people who are doing the repairs, but I believe there must be a better way that we can get more of these units repaired. You know what's going to happen. I mean, the air conditioning units will all be repaired, and there'll be a report put out saying it's done on November the 1st, which is not the day that we need it. And so this money will help us with all these overhauls, but I'm concerned about a lot of these things where people have just accepted the fact it takes 4 days to fix an air conditioning unit on one subway car, and I don't think that's good enough, and there's got to be a better way.
It has not gone unnoticed by listeners that the same John Tory that is praising this announcement and praising the investment in transit is the same John Tory that is asking the TTC to cut 2.6% of its operating budget. How do you square that circle?
Well, the first thing I'll say is also the same John Tory, under whose administration, under whose personal leadership, has invested $135 million new dollars in the first 2 years of his administration. And I will also say, yes, it is the same John Tory who is saying to the TTC, a $1.7 billion organization, that I would like you to find some proposed efficiencies in your budget that would amount to 2.6%. Now, on last year's budget, that amounts to $16 million. Now, they need to find more because we have huge pressures on us, Matt, including, say, $30 million for the increased cost of Wheel-Trans because the eligibility requirements have been changed. And I'm not opposed to that. I'm just saying it's put a pressure. Presto, we're going to get a bill from the Ontario government for the implementation of Presto for $30 million. So I'm just saying to the TTC management, not that we have approved in advance or that we're going to approve anything they put forward, but please go and look and see if you can find 2.6% and propose to us how you would do that if you had to do it.
The CEO of the TTC...
That's the way to do this in the context of trying to make do and do better with the money we have.
The CEO of the TTC, Andy Byford, says that this may mean making undesirable cuts to services. You just spent 4 minutes talking about how we need to be more reliable to keep people on transit, and he's now saying that if you ask him to cut 2.6%, he's going to have to cut services from transit.
Well, I have met with him, and I have asked him to propose 2.6% in efficiencies they could achieve in their budget, and we will see what that list says. But we haven't accepted any of them. We haven't voted in favor of any of them. We've simply asked for them. And I can tell you right now, I don't think there's a listener out there, whatever they may email you, that in their own businesses they're involved in or in their own household budgets, they don't sometimes have to look for better ways to do things to save money. And that's all I'm asking the TTC to do. This money will help us with the repairs and a number of other things, but it doesn't help with the pressure that is caused by getting a bill for $30 million from the provincial government for Presto. And so my job is to sort of find ways. I could just say, well, look, we'll just pay for all of that out of increased fares and increased property taxes, and I don't think anybody would be congratulating me for that either. My job is a tough job, but part of it starts with saying, are we spending all of the money, every penny of it, in an effective manner first? And I'm putting them to the test of telling me some places they could do things different. And I just don't accept the answer in a $1.7 billion organization with thousands of employees that there is no place they can find efficiency. I don't accept it. I'm sorry, and it's not me being anti-transit. I am the same guy that has improved and restored service that was cut by the previous administration and that has invested $135 million in new service since I took office.
All right. We'll leave it there, but we'll hear more, I'm sure, about the money that's coming in and perhaps the money that's going out as well.
Absolutely. It's a fair discussion.
Mayor Tory, thank you.
Thank you.